Okay, in this section 4-10, we're looking at special segments in triangles. And so the first special segment we're going to look at is called median. And a median starts at a vertex, hits the opposite side at the midpoint. Starts at a vertex, hits the opposite side at the midpoint. We know this is the midpoint of the triangle because of these two congruent markings. It means it's right in the middle, midpoint. Okay, so altitude starts at a vertex and hits the other side perpendicular. Remember, this is the symbol for perpendicular, right? So an altitude starts at a vertex and then hits the other side perpendicular, not necessarily in the middle. Also, by the way, it is possible for the altitude to be outside of the triangle in an obtuse triangle. The altitude that's 90 degrees with the opposite side could be outside of the triangle. That's possible. All right? So perpendicular bisector. This one, the name tells you exactly what it does. It's perpendicular, and it hits at the midpoint. This one does not have to start at any particular vertex. It doesn't have to go through a vertex. So a perpendicular bisector will look something like this. All right? And many times it's continued to be drawn through the ends of the triangle. Then we have an angle bisector, and an angle bisector cuts an angle in half. So an angle bisector will look like this. Okay, it comes and it hits and cuts an angle in half, and it'll be denoted by these two congruent markings. Now, let me just say this. Okay, so it's important for us to know the characteristics of each one of these segments so that we are able to identify them. So once again, median starts at a vertex, hits at the midpoint. All right, so the median of the road is the middle. Maybe that helps you remember. Altitude starts at a vertex, hits at 90 degrees, perpendicular. Altitude straight up. All right, that's what altitude is. Perpendicular bisector, that one tells you perpendicular and bisects. Perpendicular and bisect, cut in half. An angle bisector, that tells you exactly what it does. It cuts the angle in half. So these two tell you, the name of the segment tells you exactly what it does. And so these two, you really have to make sure you memorize the characteristics of. Start at a vertex, median, midpoint, altitude, perpendicular to one of the sides. Okay, now it always doesn't have to come down to the bottom side. I mean, if I turned it like this, upside down, that's still an altitude. That's still a median. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to come straight down is what I'm telling you. All right? Also, there is an occasion where if you've got, let's say, an isosceles triangle, and this segment comes straight down, hits in the middle, is 90 degrees, and bisects the angle, it is possible for a segment to be all four of these at the same time. It's a median, it's an altitude, it's a perpendicular bisector, and an angle bisector. So this one segment is all four of them, and that typically will occur when these two sides are the same length. All right? So in an isosceles triangle is where this happens. Okay? All right. So the next thing that we come to is we want to identify the segment as one of those four special segments that we just looked at and studied. Okay? So AE. So AE is here. AE is here. All right, so let's see if we can identify it. It starts at a vertex and it hits the other side perpendicular. Well, what's the name of that segment? Starts at a vertex, hits the other side perpendicular. It's an altitude. All right, next one, DF. DF hits perpendicular and it cuts this side in half, so it bisects it. Perpendicular and bisects, hits at the midpoint. Perpendicular hits at the midpoint. It's a perpendicular bisector. All right. And so CG, let's take a look at that one. CG, it cuts the angle in half. It's an angle bisector. Oops. Okay, angle bisector. And BD, BD starts at the vertex, hits the other side at the midpoint. That makes it a median. All right, so we should be able to identify these segments as to which one it is based on the characteristics. Okay? Here's the next type of problem that we're going to be looking at. Okay, so in this question it tells me, or in this problem it tells me that BD is a median. So immediately I should know that these two segments are the same length because median starts at a vertex, hits the other side at the midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and mark these two as congruent. All right? Now, take a look at what they've given me. AD, this piece, 5x minus 3. CD, this piece, 3x plus 7. Well, what I have to do is I have to find AD and I have to find CD. And so, since these two segments are congruent, I can set these two pieces equal to one another. So here's my equation. 5x minus 3 equals 3x plus 7. All right, so I'm going to move the 3x over. 5x minus 3x equals to 7 plus 3. And that'll be 2x is equal to 10. Now I can divide by 2, and I can get x equal 5. But remember, that's not the answer. Why not? Because they didn't ask me for x. They asked me to find AD. So I need to take 5 and plug it back in for AD. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 minus 3 is 22. All right? And I already know that CD also has to be 22 because these two are the same. If you wanted to verify, 5 times 3 is 15 plus 7 is 22. All right, so don't forget, make sure you answer what the question asks you for. The answer is not 5. It didn't ask for x. You got to plug them back into each one of these. All right, and remember, 5 is probably going to be answer choice A, so be careful with that. All right? Okay, let's see, what else do we got here? Next type of problem, it says BD is an altitude this time, which, remember, the characteristics of an altitude, it starts at a vertex and hits the other side at 90 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and put a 90-degree mark here. And now they tell me the measure of angle, let's trace it out, ADB equals, so that's this angle right here, all right, is 12x minus 6, find x. All right, so if this angle is 12x minus 6, remember, if this angle is 90 degrees, the other one also has to be 90 degrees because together they add up to 180. So what's 12x minus 6 equal to? Well, it's going to be equal to 90. All right, so there's my equation. I'm going to move the 6 over, 90 plus 6, and 12x is equal to 96, and I'm going to divide it now by 12, and I'm going to get x is equal to 8 is the correct answer. Or is it? Do I have to plug it in? No, because they asked me to find x. Once I get x equal, I'm done. Well, why didn't they ask me to plug in on this one? Because I should already know that the answer is 90. I wouldn't have even had to do any of this. Make sense? All right. So there you go. So let's take what we've learned here, and your quiz is waiting for you in Canvas. And we're done with Unit 4, guys.